This is the 8th day of June 2007. We're interviewing at the Veterans Memorial Building, or the old library in Lindstrom, and we're interviewing Marilyn Hogle. She was born on June 25th, 1926, and she is she was a government worker during World War II, and she worked in Washington, D.C. And my name is Don Bungham, and I'm working with the American Legion Post 83 in Lindstrom, the American Legion Post 272 of Chisago City, the VFW Post of 7267 of Lindstrom, and the Chisago County Historical Society. I'm going to have Marilyn start by telling us about her experience, what she did during the war and before and since. So start by telling us about your family and how you got connected with Don and so on and so forth. Okay?
Okay. You want to know about my family? I was born in Ticonderoga, New York. No, actually I was born in West Springfield, Massachusetts, but my father soon moved to Ticonderoga, and that's where I grew up. I had two older brothers, both of whom served in World War II. One who gave his life, and he was shot down over Germany. I graduated from high school in 1943, and that summer, representatives from the FBI came to town, and we were looking for workers to come to Washington, D.C. So I went. I remember it was an overwhelming situation to get on the train and go to Washington all by myself. Fortunately, there were some other girls working there who were from Ticonderoga as well, and one of them I went to live with. And so there were three of us girls in a room. And most of us at that time lived in a room. We didn't have apartments. And when I got there, Vicki Kissel persuaded me to come to work where she worked, and that was the Petroleum Administration for War, or PAW as we were known. And I did call the FBI and say I wasn't coming, but the thing was, I think I had a better job. I was a real secretary. And we worked in the Interior building, which was a new building in Washington. And the people that made up the Petroleum Administration for War were all on loan from oil companies. And it was their responsibility to allocate different gasolines. And in our department it was aviation gasoline to the various parts of the world where we were fighting. And the man I worked for was, his name was J.T. Akers. I don't know how I remember that name, and he was from Shell Oil Company. We didn't go out much because we worked a 6-day week, 9-hour day, and so our days and nights were pretty well filled. And I think one of the things I remember doing for fun was to go to the outdoor concerts they had that were, they took turns. One would be the Marine band, the next week it'd be the Army band, and then the Navy band, and so forth. But this was very nice and this was free, of course. I remember that my starting salary there was $14.40 a year, $1,440. And so I was pretty careful with my money. And I remember we could get a full meal in the cafeteria where I worked for 35 cents. And that was my main meal of the day. Things have changed.
Yes, they
I didn't go home very often. You know, this is before plane travel. We went by train, and there more than once I sat on my suitcase because servicemen were always given the, you know, first chances at
Sure.
at getting on the train. And you know, there was no reservations. You just took your chances. Servicemen were real common to see in uniform, and at that time, servicemen wore their uniform all the time. They didn't, you know, as it is today. If they're not on duty, they don't wear their uniform. I remember that, you know, a lot of things were in short supply, and you had a coupon book, and you had to use certain coupons. You were only allowed, I think, one pair of shoes a year. You were, and this was hard for me because I was just out of high school. I didn't have many shoes I could wear to work, you know. But, you know, that's the way it was. And sugar was in short supply. They didn't make any new cars then. They didn't make cars, period. I remember that, you know, that was before nylons were made, because I think they used nylons in the for making parachutes, didn't they? Nylon. I mean, and that was wasn't that a relatively new?
Yes, it was
Yes.
very new at the time.
Yeah, but I do remember one thing that is kind of seems funny to me now, is that they sold a product that you could smear on your legs to make it look like you had stockings on.
Oh, really?
And they sold it in different colors. Anyway, that's what I wore for stockings instead of stockings. And let's see, what else? Oh, I remember spending my first Christmas away from home. And my father sent me a big box of stuff. And the only thing I remember out of that box was walnuts that he had gone out and picked, you know. They still had the shucks on them. I remember having trouble getting the shucks off, but that was kind of a...
They raised walnuts up in New York?
Well, they didn't raise them. They were just, you know, in the
Yeah.
natural landscape.
Oh, okay.
Walnut trees. Yeah, and they were big. I think they're called English walnuts, right?
Or not butternuts.
Well, they had butternuts too. Maybe that was it.
Yeah, English walnuts and butternuts.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, and, you know, it was just one of the things you did in the fall was go out and
Okay.
and I don't know. I don't have many. It's very difficult for me to remember exactly all the things that happened. But one day I got a phone call from my father at work, and he was crying.
He was telling you about your brother?
I'm sorry. This brings back a lot of memories. My brother had been shot down over Germany. And I remember saying to my father, "Are you sure it said shot down? Are you sure he didn't say missing?" And he said, "No, he's been killed." And so that was the end. That's when I decided to come home.
When was this approximately? Or
January or maybe February. He was,
No, January.
yeah, but
Because I was in the vicinity where he was shot down.
the thing is,
January of 44?
It was during the-
45.
45?
Just before.
During the breakthrough.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
During the breakthrough.
Uh,
As a matter of fact, I think it was the first clear day after I got out of the breakthrough. So it's early January.
So anyway, my other brother had been alerted that he would soon be sent overseas, so I decided I better go home. I was unprepared to do that. I didn't think that I would feel this way.
When, I was gonna ask, you got $1,440 a year,
Right.
and you lived 3 in a room, or, for
Well,
houses?
yeah.
And how much was that approximately? Your housing costs?
Oh dear, I can't remember. I just honestly cannot remember. But I was able to get by on it, you know.
Sure,
And,
sure. How much was the train ticket back to?
I don't remember that
Do
either.
you remember? Okay.
No,
But, yeah,
I have no idea.
all right.
But that's probably one reason I didn't go home very often.
Sure. Tell me a little bit more about the person who came to Ticonderoga and was recruiting. And how old were you at the time?
Oh, I was just out of high school.
Just out of high school.
17, yeah.
And they wanted you down in Washington DC.
Yeah. Yeah.
Interesting.
I don't remember the, the person at all. But,
Uh-huh.
there was at least 2 other gals from our hometown that went down there too. Not at the same time I did.
So,
Margaret Spittler was one of them.
have you been back to Washington DC now, or in past years?
Well, just before Don and I were married, his sister and I took a trip down there to
Okay.
see things. I remember we stopped in New York City and we went into a place to have something to eat. And they wouldn't allow us in there without escorts. I think things have changed. I remember that hurt us terribly. But we didn't have a very good feeling about New York City.
Uh-huh.
But, we just visited all the places
Sure.
that I had known in Washington. And Washington is a very pretty city. There's no industry there.
Yeah, right. Could you, you were working for the organization that allocated gas and so on to the military. Could you, thinking that, can you get any feeling about where the big battles were coming, and so on? Did you
Not
have
really.
anything like that? Not
No,
really.
well, the main, they were pretty quiet about their
I'm sure they
activities.
were, because that's,
The country was an all-out war,
Yeah.
It was completely different from, we know there's a war going on now,
yeah.
but, walking down the street, you'd hardly know it.
Were you briefed on security measures and talk and so on when you went to Washington?
No,
Okay,
no. I might have been more so if I'd gone to work for the FBI,
okay.
but I didn't,
Mhm. Okay.
Well, and it was interesting you mentioned Margaret Spittler, and
Yeah, this is a good friend of mine who we visited fairly recently. She's now in Tennessee. And she married a German person who had been at war, had been in the German army.
well, he was in the wasn't he a
Yeah, he was in the Air
Pilot?
Force, but administrative.
I really honestly.
he was in the Air Force?
Yeah, okay. Which is kind of, it makes me wonder, I was thinking about telling my friends who I had worked with about this particular activity. And I'm thinking, I wonder how they would handle that, talking to a person who was married to
Yeah.
a German, who now obviously is a United States citizen.
Sure. Well, they always said, there were a lot of cousins fighting cousins in that European war. And so that, but,
Just like the Civil War.
right,
Here.
exactly.